Hey guys, it's Emily. Welcome to the third edition of Grass River Microclasses. And today we're going to be focusing on early returning birds, which is one of my favorite topics. It really means that spring is here. So specifically, we're going to be looking at how to identify these birds based on their songs, because often that's all you don't see the birds necessarily, but you hear them. And so this will give you a little primer on how to identify them based on their voices. We're only going to go over 4, so it's going to be pretty easy, pretty short and simple. There aren't actually that many returners that have made it back yet, more than 4, but we're going to go over the 4 most common ones that I think you might see around your yards and your houses. All right, let's get started. All right, so the first bird I wanted to talk about is the eastern Phoebe. This bird loves to live around people's yards. And so it's a great one to talk about to start to learn how to identify birds, because you'll often see it. So it's actually pretty drab looking. It's pretty brownish gray sort of, and like with a lighter colored breast. But if you do see it, it's pretty easy to identify because it has some pretty specific habits. So one thing it does is it likes to perch on a branch, and it kind of pumps or taps its tail, and my husband calls them tappers for that reason. He's not much of a birder, but we can't all be, right? Yeah, and so it'll perch on the edge of a branch doing its tapping thing with its tail, and then it'll sally out, which just means fly out and grab an insect out of the air and then fly back. They're part of the flycatcher family, so yep, they catch flying insects to eat. So if you do see it, that's a good way to identify them. But an even better way and a more precise way, I think, is by listening for their song, which is really onomatopoeic. It sounds like they're saying Phoebe, and it's a really buzzy, sort of raspy 2-part whistle. It sounds like Phoebe, Phoebe. And as we learned in the first microclass when I tried to imitate the grouse, I am not good at trying to imitate bird calls or songs. So let's try to listen for it in this next clip. There'll be a few other birds singing in the background, which is beautiful and great, so, but a little hard, to zero in on that Phoebe, but see if you can zero in on that 2-part buzzy whistle. The next bird I want to talk about is the eastern meadowlark, and these are gorgeous birds. They have a really rich yellow breast and belly with a jet black sort of V chevron shape across them, and they look pretty much identical to western meadowlarks. Like, it's really hard to tell them apart, almost impossible by sight if you're familiar with western meadowlarks. And really the only good way to tell them apart is by their song, which is completely different, like so different that meadowlarks that are eastern meadowlarks and western meadowlarks that are in the overlapping part of their range, like, can't recognize each other as meadowlarks, which is crazy. And I guess I should say they're part of the blackbird family, not the lark family. But the part of their name that is really accurate is the meadow bird. They love to hang out in meadows, native prairies, which we don't have so many up here, up in northern Michigan, but further south in their range for sure. But they'll also hang out in like fallow fields, agricultural fields, which you'll get a look of, like a typical meadowlark habitat up here when we play the call clip in a little bit. But the call, or the song, really distinctive 4-part whistle usually. It's very lyrical, kind of flute-like. It's beautiful. And I had a teacher that described it once as spring of the year. And it's kind of like syncopated beat like that, I kind of think of. Yeah, they usually sing if they can get like slightly elevated above the field that they're in, like from a fence post or like a little shrub. And if they can't, then they'll just sing right in the middle of the field. So let's listen for it. Remember that 4-part spring of the year. See if you can hear it.
Alright, so I know it was a little hard to hear the eastern meadowlark in that last video, but suffice it to say, they're here, they made it. I saw the first one this year on March 27th, I think. So yeah. Alright, so 2 more birds, and I'm going to talk about these ones at the same time because later in the clip they're singing at the same time. And that's because they like to live in pretty similar habitat, or at least habitats that are normally like right next to each other. So the first bird is the red-winged blackbird. That's usually what I think of as like the first bird to return to northern Michigan in the spring. And sometimes it's as early as like the very beginning of March. This year I didn't see them until March 18th. But you know, I might not have been looking maybe this year as much. But they live in marshy habitats, and they're like the most aptly named bird ever, red-winged blackbird, for the males. The females look totally different. They look like a large sparrow, like streaky brown. They kind of skulk through the cattails. You don't see them as much. But yeah, so the red-winged blackbird's super distinctive song. It's loud and abrasive, I think, but still a joy to hear because it means spring is here. So it sounds like conqueree, conqueree, and the last note is really trilly. Yeah, so listen for that in the clip. And you'll often hear like one male singing and then another male responding over here, and then the first male singing, and then they go back and forth like that, kind of battling it out. And I saw the first one March 18th, I think I said that. Okay, good. Okay, so second bird that I want to talk about that's in the same clip is the song sparrow. And they're kind of drab looking, you know, they're like normally how sparrows are. Kind of rusty reddish brown with gray streaks, streaky pale breast with like what people call a stick pin, so like a dark spot in the middle of the breast. And John James Audubon once said about them, I read this recently, he said, "Though its attire is exceedingly plain, it is pleasing to hear." And it's like, oh, thanks for the backhanded compliment, Audubon. But it's pretty accurate, and the song is really beautiful, distinctive. It sounds like, Madge, 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 put on the tea, get a little. At least that's how I learned it. So it's got like a few notes in the beginning, Madge, 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 and then it's a high note, and then kind of like a clattery sort of like kettle at the end. And I saw the first one of them on March 21st this year, so relatively early. And I wanted to talk about this bird because they like to hang out in like brushy habitats, so yards are a great spot for these guys too. So listen for that Madge, Madge, Madge to turn the key, little, for the song sparrow, and then the red-winged blackbird is conqueree. So see if you can hear both of those in this next clip. Alright, so that's it for today. Hopefully you learned something on this Grass River Microclass, early returning birds. And if you have any questions about birds that you hear that you can't identify, just shoot us an email. You know, you can email me at emily@grassriver.org or our general email at info@grassriver.org. We'd be happy to help. Another great resource is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's website. It's called All About Birds. That's really great for listening to clips of bird songs and calls. So stay safe out there, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.